Hi everyone, I'm Hayana Verissimo. I'm a staff product designer at GitLab and currently acting product design manager for the CI/CD team. And today here I have Pedro to talk a little bit about career development and leadership in design. So Pedro, why don't you get started and introduce yourself to us?
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me. As she said, my name is Pedro Moreira da Silva, and I'm a staff product designer working at GitLab in the code review area of the product. And I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal, the sunny side of Europe.
Awesome. And Pedro, I'm curious to hear about what do you do as staff product designer, but also your background, how you came to be a designer and your trajectory at GitLab. Could you give us some insights on your previous lives, but also your path at the organization?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to be brief. So my education background is in arts and then specialized in general design. Um, and when I was in college, I learned and did a bunch of different disciplines of design. So industrial design, graphic design, interior design, some parts of urban planning as well. It was in the school that I attended, which is the Faculty of Architecture here in Lisbon. The motto is, or like the slogan is, from the scale of the city to the scale of the hand, and that's more or less the different skills that I worked at. And I always had a passion for technology, and I played a lot of video games, and that's what I wanted to pursue. So right after college, I went work at a startup, invoicing software startup here in Lisbon, and I realized I wanted to, at a certain point, I realized I wanted to broaden my horizons. So I went and worked in a more of an agency and consultancy setting, and that was really good. It was like an eye opener, also because I had to contact a lot with people that were not educated as much as the internal team on technology, on design, on people, and how you bring all of that together with the business. And so it was a great position to be in and learn a lot about different industries, different sizes, different kinds of technologies. And at the same time, I was invited to give some lectures at a local school, digital school here in Lisbon, and that was a great experience. I loved that, trying to explain what you have learned for many years and teach them to someone who's straight out of college or changing their background. Like I had people who were lawyers, but they didn't want to be lawyers anymore, so they wanted to become front-end developers, or people that had lost touch with front-end development and wanted to learn it again. And in that class, I was teaching just the basics of user experience, which is very broad. And it was a challenge, and it was really interesting to try to frame the concepts that I knew by heart in a different way. And it allowed me to grow myself as a designer. And yeah, after that, I knew that I wanted to go back to my roots working at a startup, and I wanted to focus on a single product and nurture it. So, and I also wanted to work remotely for many different reasons. And so I was fortunate enough to end up at GitLab, and I've been here for 4 years now, and it's been an amazing ride so far.
This is awesome. I knew that your background was a mix of everything, but it's so interesting to hear you came from this architecture background and graphic design. It's also nice to get to know our peers a little bit better. It's very interesting. And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
mentioned this whole mix, right? How do you think these past experiences helped you develop skills towards design leadership?
Sure. So I think one of the first things that was very much encouraged, well, throughout my education, but especially in college, was the presentation skills. Those were extremely like the teachers were very much they were very demanding about the presentation skills and how you presented your work, and especially how you linked your decisions to whatever you did, and so explain all of the rationale. And at the same time, they give a sense of empowerment so that each student could try to influence other colleagues to in the job and in the work that they were doing. So that was one of the first things, and it was very, very encouraged, that kind of attitude in the class. And after that, as I said, I had multiple opportunities to lead and to help empower teams. And I think as designers, I think regardless of where you come from and what education you have, usually designers are the minority in a company. And so by default, you're almost required to educate others and to lead by design, and lead by showing what good user experience what good user experience is. So in specifically, as I said, dealing with clients directly, and helping them understand why this was good, and how you could link that to the outcomes that they wanted, but also leading teams that were made of front-end developers and back-end developers and junior designers, to understand exactly what was the direction that we wanted with the project, and from a design point, what was the theme and how that could influence all of the technical and design decisions. So I think it was a mix of empowering teams to make decisions on their own, and to feel better about what they were doing, because I think design has a lot of strength in that, in adding value and purpose to what we're doing. I think design is a really good tool for that. And at the same time, it was the education, and not only in-house, but also with the clients. And then, as I said before, when working in the digital school, I had the pleasure to do that. And after that, I've been invited to many different conferences and events. And it's always great to share whatever it is and try to share and teach others, but also to learn from their own experience. So I think, yeah, it's a mix of many different things, but I realized that in the end, for me, it was all about seeing, yeah, this might sound a bit cheesy, but it's about seeing others happy,
Mm-hmm.
and happy about their work, which translates into many different things, and better teamwork and better morale and all of that. And so that's what I more and more try to pursue, in whatever form that may be. I don't know if that's too
That's very
broad.
interesting. It makes sense. Sorry, it froze for a second, but it makes sense to me. But it also aligns with the role of staff designer, right? So it meaning, I think staff means that you have to be confident about seeing a problem and fixing it, but also leading through inspiration, right? Doing what you have to do with confidence, that people will follow, that you can inspire, but also help people grow their skills, help people fix problems, help people find solutions to broader problems within an organization. And that kind of takes me to my next question, about what do you actually do? What is your role today at GitLab? What does a staff product designer do?
Yeah, I think, yeah, you already know the answer, but I mean, it's for those who are watching, it's a challenge today, because it's always changing, and I guess that's one of the reasons why uh, I've stayed here at GitLab, is because throughout the last 4 years, it has been constant change, and I like change, and it hasn't been too much of a disruptive change. But for staff, I was fairly recently promoted to this role, and to be honest, we don't have a structure that can support staff designers, or for that matter, any staff level role in the UX department to exemplify all of the responsibilities that we would like to see in a staff. And the disclaimer here is that also that is acknowledged by all of the leaders in the UX department. So everyone is aware of the expectations and that it's difficult to perform at that level today. Because we need to also grow the UX department to be able to perform those responsibilities more and have product designers and senior product designers handle more of the actual crafts of the design. The good news is that this week, or no, last week, I got the news that we, in my product area in code review, Sun Young, she is a designer from another area of the product, and she would be on a temporary grant on our team and working with us in partnership for 3 months. And I hope that this will give me a bit more time to work on those responsibilities and flex my staff muscles. And but yeah, today, what I would say, to directly answer your question, it's a mix of many things, and I have to balance the milestone work, so working on things that will be released on the next version of GitLab. So those commitments that we know are always there. Also working on more strategic things. But what I've tried to do more and more as I've been promoted to staff is think about what are the things that I can help my team, the UX department, and the whole product team to work better and to use design better, basically. And also being more participative in design reviews and giving feedback to designers and making sure I'm aware of what everyone is doing, which is a daunting task, of course. But I think that's one of the things that we need to do as staff, is to be aware of what's happening and try to create bridges between people and connect people. And also another thing that I'm very aware of and I'm trying to do more and more is try to give to everyone good examples of what I believe is good ways of working as a designer. And that might come from me, but of course I try first and foremost to look at others and try to find examples like you, Rayana, and others. Like, this is a great way, for example, to request feedback, or this is a great way to break down your designs, or this is, so all of the things that we need to practice as designers. So our craft, that's what I'm focused more. And again, this goes back to empowering others. And yeah, I'll stop there because I could go on and on, but yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah, this is super interesting. And for those who are watching are not from GitLab and don't see how we communicate, for example, through Slack, and how we share examples, I think this is something that it's so important to empower our teams to learn by examples, not just lead by examples, but learn from what other designers are doing in other areas of the product, how they communicate, right, with their counterparts, how they break problems into smaller, achievable pieces of designs that can be delivered and developed to a team. So I think it's important to have like you as a staff product designer, kind of
one of the
bridging
things,
these gaps. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to say is, for example, I mean, what you're doing now, Rayana, you're one of the staff product designers, and this very project of these UX leadership talks, of talking with other designers and other ICs that were promoted and that made their way into leadership. It's also one of the ways of helping the design team and others and empower them, because if anything, it will clarify their questions and clarify what they want and where they should go next and what they should work on in their growth plan. So I think that's also a great example of what I would expect a staff product designer to do.
Yeah. And then let's enter into that part of the conversation, right, about leadership and exemplifying that. We know and we recognize that not everyone wants to advance more in their career in terms of seeking a higher or level, right, in their role. So not everyone wants to become a staff or a manager. And we, as an organization, we have a lot of opportunities, but also frameworks that can help ICs to either create more exposure or get involved with other areas, right, of the product that would allow them to exercise and exemplify leadership. So I'm curious to hear from you if you could talk a little bit about more how leadership is not about your title and how leadership in design can come from any level.
Sure. Yeah, I think even unconsciously, if someone is doing a great job at this, if someone is being an example and not doing that on purpose, it's just an outcome, a byproduct of what they do and how they work, they are already leading. And the difference is how do you frame those examples and how often does that occur, and how connected is someone with that part of them that is a leader. And of course, leadership, it only happens if people see the leader in you, if people see that you are an example, or that you can be the channel through which examples flow. And for me, the leadership part just came out naturally, and I had throughout the time I've been at GitLab, I've had numerous people coming to me and saying, either this person told me to talk to you because you've been in a long time and you know a lot of things, and you are an example at this and this and that. And also some people, yeah, it's a very good thing to hear, but they consider me like a role model or an example of what they think is a good designer at GitLab. And I realized at a certain point that with all of this experience, with all of this feedback, and also with my personal attitude, that the balance between leading and not leading, so doing more of the work and not just caring more about exactly what you're doing for your own group and your own team. For me, I feel like I want to spend more time in the helping part and empowering others and trying to give them great examples of how to work better together than in the more detailed work and solving all of those more detailed problems. Because in the end, it's still problem solving, and I still want to be attached to the craft. But I think more and more I want to lean more towards that part. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. It does. Makes a lot of sense. And knowing you, I've been here for almost 2.5 years now, and I can really think of a lot of examples of how you exemplify that type of leadership as a senior and now as a staff product designer. But it's nice to hear you talking on that as well. And it makes me think of I think for us, we are a special case, right? As in this organization that we've been here for like 4 years now. So you've seen so much, and the organization's changed in so many ways that indeed you exemplify what design is in the organization, right? And the opportunities that what I want to get is on learning and development opportunities. I think the opportunities they happen and they are shaped in a different way for different people, right? Depending on where they want to get within their careers or what skills they want to develop, etc. For you, did you have any internal and external learning and development opportunities that you decided to seek inside GitLab that helped influence your career, that helped you advance as a designer? Or do you see as a more a fluid trajectory towards design leadership?
Yeah, great question. I definitely, it's more as a fluid trajectory, and that's why I think for me it was a very natural thing, because it was aligned with who I am. Basically, it's not like I come here and I put on a costume and okay, now I'm Pedro, the staff designer. It's also about, I think, the way you live, right? I think someone who is a manager, a people manager, they are a people manager at GitLab, and also outside of GitLab, they're probably a people manager inside of their team, their family, with their friends, and so these attitudes are, I think, are exemplified throughout life. So for me, the learning aspect, it was a very fluid thing. I can't pinpoint something specifically, but at the same time, I have to admit that um, over like maybe the more recent 2 years or so, I've been more focused on my own learning and self development, and trying to create more time for reflection, more time for reading and things like that, because I was being caught up a lot in the work that we're doing here with things that were happening in my life. So I didn't have time to focus on that. And I didn't specifically pursue resources that taught about design leadership. Um, what I was most interested in was relationships and uh, and happiness. And this might sound very different from what you would hear, but I think when you consider and reflect and learn about all of the aspects that go into relationship, and you think about how people perceive happiness and fulfillment and all of that, you start to pick up on the basic ingredients that, again, not only function in GitLab as a staff product designer and leading, but also in every other aspect of your life, basically. Um, and and that's why I try to do more and more. Of course, there's some formal um, or more specific education and resources about design leadership. For example, right now I'm reading a book called Org Design for Design Orgs. I think that's the correct title. And it talks about a lot of this that we're discussing, not only the leadership, but how do you structure teams and how do you create the ideal um, a place and form for there to work effectively. So I think it's a mix of different things, but for me, again, it's mostly fluid. And I think you can't you can't force it. Basically, I think if you force it too long, you realize that you're not being yourself, and that's the key thing.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about the skills and then the trajectory that, in a way, reflects who you are as a person and as a designer as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also from the same opinion. And I think there are a certain number of skills that you already mentioned, for example, the communication, right? Being able to defend your designs, being able to sell design, be able to bridge gaps with in a team or in an organization. They are important not just in design leadership, but in design in general. But I wanted to know from you, just you can just pinpoint some specific skills
Mm-hmm.
that you think that any designer should be developing to exercise leadership in whatever role and whatever seniority that they are today. What do you think is the three most important things? Let's put it like that.
Well, that's a very difficult question. Three
Sorry,
most
Pedro.
important things that people must try to do, or skills to be a leader. Well, I think like a very good example is Jeremy Elder. He's our senior product designer. I don't want to be wrong about the title, because when he joined,
Yeah.
it was also about talking about visual design. Right? I think it's senior product designer for the front end and UX foundations team, which, among other things, they are the stewards of our design system at GitLab. And one of the things that he brought with him when he joined GitLab, and I think I'm probably sure that he already was nurturing that skill for a long time, was accessibility. And if for many, I mean, in many issues and many tasks that I have worked in, whenever accessibility came up, I thought of Jeremy. And not that I don't think I know about accessibility, because I know a lot about accessibility, but I know that not only Jeremy knows more, but he is probably more passionate than me regarding
Mm-hmm.
that. And I don't know if it was intentionally or not, but the key thing that I want to extract from here would be to look at areas in the team. So that would be the UX team, where you can spot some gaps in skills where like we're lacking people that know about accessibility, or we're lacking people that know about visual design, or that lack about specific UX research methodology, or this or that, and try to see if that also overlaps with your passions and what you want to learn. Because again, it's easy to force yourself to learn something and be great at something,
Mm-hmm.
but that won't make you happy. Again, it goes back to the point about happiness, because at the end of the day, we're spending much of our awake time working for this company or working for whatever company it is. And we need to be not only good, but also doing what we like and what we enjoy doing. So yeah, it's seeing that overlap of needs for skills and the passion. And I think in this case, Jeremy, with the accessibility example, is he ends up being a leader in that area. So that's one way of exemplifying leadership while being an IC, right? I don't know if Jeremy he has the expectation or the motivation to become a staff product designer, but even being an IC as a senior, I see him as a leader of accessibility, because he champions accessibility in our company. Um, I'm trying to come up with other
You don't have
points.
to
It's
come up with all
difficult
the
on
other
the spot.
points. I still have other questions for you, but I just kind of I want to give my input there. I think you do touch on such an
Yeah.
important aspect of design leadership, that is finding your brand, right? Finding who you are inside an organization. So I agree with you. Like Jeremy, accessibility, I also think of Jeremy. UI design, I think of Jeremy, right? So for example, when I think about structure, organization, communication, I think of Pedro. If I think about research, I think of Laurie. So there are some aspects, and I think that's also the beauty of our organization, that we do get mostly, I think, generalist designers
Mm-hmm.
in our group, in our team. And I think that gives us so much opportunity to find what we're good at and what we like, and explore that aspect
Mm-hmm.
of our professional brand, right?
Yeah.
And define your path in the organization towards that. Not necessarily thinking, yeah, the only way to go is to become a manager or is to become staff designer. You create so much impact in your stage group and with your strategic counterparts, with the stage groups around you, when you become a leader as a designer in whatever level of the organization. So I think you touched
Yeah.
on a very, very important point there.
Yeah, the second thing I just thought about, and we were discussing the brands and making that shine. I think that's one of the other things that perhaps most designers don't do. And I mean, one of the reasons is because they're always um, swimming in work, but it's making your work visible. And we have, I mean, everything that we need at GitLab. We're very fortunate about the way we work,
Mm-hmm.
which helps doing that much more than any other company I've worked with, because we write everything down, we record videos, we have artifacts and breadcrumbs of everything that we do. So it's much easier, still difficult, but it's much easier to collect everything and make a case for, hey, I'm doing this like this, or do you think this is a good example, or this or that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most of the times people could be leaders or exemplify certain responsibilities or disciplines very well, but they just haven't stopped to think, well, what am I doing well that I can share with others? And take the time to stop and find the
Yeah.
best medium formats to share it. Um,
Yeah, finding the focus time for that as well. I think we get caught in the trap of working on deliverables, or sometimes being the results, too much results oriented, and not do like what you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about taking the time to reflect on my achievements, who I am, where do I want to get, what else do I need to learn, and that's also part of the process because as much as we are here, of course, to perform and do well, exemplify our values, etc., we are also here to develop ourselves, right, inside this organization as designers,
Mhm.
as people, and taking the time indeed to document things and to help others. I think that's also key to success. Like you mentioned before about your role as staff designer, what you do on a day-to-day basis is to facilitate, right, growth. And we can do that when we are transparent, but also when we proactively create these opportunities to share, I would say, not only the good things or what went well, but also the challenges, right? And what you've learned
Mhm.
from the experience and the processes that didn't work so well. So I'll give an example. Once we started with the UX scorecards, remember the CMS
Mhm.
validation. So we had this very well defined process that once we start using, we're like, wait, this doesn't. A couple of things here
Mm,
don't make sense. We need to align. What do? We fix it. We create proposals. We show that things work in a certain way, but can be improved also in a different
yeah,
direction. And I think that's also making your work visible, right? Is to improving
yeah,
parts of
exactly.
the processes in the system, in the organization.
Yeah, there are other two things that I'll be brief that come to mind. One is linked to what you just said, that I think is also being the trailblazers. So the people that are leading charge and going where no one has gone before, and that's one of the examples we had never done that initiative, the UX scorecards. So the first
Yeah.
people that did it, they were leaders there, and they were giving the examples of, hey, this works, it doesn't work, we can make this better. That's another way to be a leader and improve your skills, is by trying to do
Hmm.
things that were never done. And the other thing I want to point out, which I don't think is usually associated with leadership, but I think it's very demonstrates a lot of maturity professionally, and could be seen as leadership, is also the act of delegating, right? Because that's also empowering. So if and asking for help, right? So if you feel swamped and if you feel like, hey, this is something we should do, but I don't have the time, or maybe I don't have the passion, let me see who is the person who might have the passion to do this. And that act of giving work to others, or not necessarily giving, but you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, I have this. Do you want to take it? Is this something that aligns with what you want?"
Yeah.
I think that's extremely powerful, and that's also another way to
Yeah.
exemplify leadership while being an IC and not always being on the leadership level. Because
Yeah.
I think that's the main difference: is what do you want? Do you want to be always in the leadership track, and your being oriented to results, are the results the to you the multiplication of the well-being and the effectiveness of others, or do you want to work more on the craft and the results to you are shipping things and reaching the outcomes as close to the user as possible? So I think those are the two levels that people will need to think about when they're
Yeah.
thinking about leadership.
And one example I can think of delegation, asking for help, and connecting right opportunities is pajamas maintainership. That's a great example of ICs learning, becoming experts in a specific area of the product, so that they can help other people succeed and get more involved in a certain part of the product. So, for example, as a trainee maintainer or as a buddy, what we do is to find these opportunities, find merge requests or issues that would be interesting for the trainee, right? To exemplify results, to exemplify leadership, exemplify expertise in the in pajamas, that's delegation, right? So, or an emerge request or an issue when we ping people. So I think these are the small things that sometimes they're just unnoticed, right? If you don't keep track of your accomplishments, or if you don't
Yeah,
really very proactive, as in thinking about how you're strategizing, how you're operating, you don't see the small nuances of leadership that you exemplify on a daily basis. So I think that's also a very important point on delegation and asking for help. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and I suffer from that severe. Like it's critical. It's I'm so bad at delegating, and I'm trying to do that more because it's. I also don't think it's a natural thing, or at least from like where I come from here in Portugal, the culture that we have, the education. It's not usually like asking for help. And maybe I don't know if it's the same where you come from or other places in the world, but here in Portugal, the education is very much about like you have the tests, you have the exams, you have the learning, and it's your answers. You can't like one of the things that I think it's interesting to think about is like students are penalized for cheating or copying each other's work. And while to a certain extent I agree with that, that also creates the culture of not asking for help or trying always to be original and trying to do things your own way, exactly, that is very different from others. And I think that penalizes a little bit like the asking for help and also delegating work to others and sharing work with others. Um, so I think it's a cultural thing, and for me, it's very difficult. And it's not the first thing that comes to mind when I'm working. But I'm very fortunate. Like for example, Marcel, my manager, he's I think more recently because he knows all of the workload that I have, he's more acute to that. So his sense of delegation is a bit more open, and he clearly flags things and says, Pedro, this is a great idea, and you would be great doing it, but maybe this person or this initiative is more worthy of your time, and you will be better doing it. So why not delegate it to someone else and think who that might be? Or so I think that's a muscle that we need to flex because it's not a natural thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that my experience, of course, I would say it takes time to learn, right? And when we learn that delegation, it would be uncomfortable. I think, especially right now, I'm acting manager, right? So I see things and I'm like, oh my goodness, I could be actually doing that or solving these problems. But when you take yourself, when you take a step back, and you allow people to take ownership of things that you are confident about doing or solving yourselves, you're creating learning opportunities, right, for yourself, because you can learn how to coach, for example, but for your team, for others around you, designers, product managers, whoever it may be, that they can now learn or develop a new skill or show results in a way that you're already confident about, and you're there to support, to observe. I think delegation, if we had more time, we would talk a little bit about that. But I think it would always be uncomfortable because it puts you in a position where you have to have trust without little context, right, from the other person, but also yourself. You have to trust that something is going to come out of that, knowing that you cannot control the situation. You're there to support. So it comes with time. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, related to that, and I want to be long about this, but another related to that and something I've been reading about recently is the constraints and leading and giving some direction and delegating without giving too many constraints, because that would not leave it open for creativity and for people to explore the problem space on their own. But also you can't leave everything in the open, and you have to give some constraints and some direction. So that balance is very difficult to achieve, and it's one of the most interesting and I think fun parts of delegating.
Yeah. We're almost at time. I think we're over time because it's always nice talking to you, so it doesn't matter. But I still want to know. My last question for you is: what other areas of your work or personal development are you hoping to explore further?
You mean as a staff product
as
designer?
staff? Yeah.
Um, oh wow, yeah, so many. So delegation, as I said, is one of them. I really want to do that more because I'm more happy when when I help others succeed than when I succeed myself. And again, this may sound incredibly cheesy, but that's generally how I feel and think. Um, and other aspects that I want to learn more about is this aspect of direction. So constraints, no constraints, what is the right balance? The other thing is um, that I want to learn how to do better is how can I, at what moments, in which formats, and when should I give examples and give credit to others so that I can not only empower them, but also have a multiplying effect of sharing best practices with others. And finally, I think one thing that I think I've learned a lot throughout my design career, but this will always be continuous learning, is how to give and receive feedback. And that's something that I want to do more and more. Um, yeah, and finally, one of the things that I'm really interested about, especially given the structure that we have at GitLab, of the number of engineers, the number of designers, the number of product managers, the product areas that we have, is of course cross-stage collaboration and empowering not only product managers but also engineers to be more design focused and just allowing for better collaboration there, because I think we as designers have and we have great examples of that. Another example of great leadership in that front is Ian Camacho with the Think Big sessions that he has been running and all of that thought leadership that he's been sharing there. I think that's a great way to make teams work better together towards shared outcomes and have a more design centric, not design in the terms of visual design or whatever it is, but design in, are we solving the right problem, and are we solving it right? So that kind of process,
Yeah.
that's what I'm really interested in learning more about. And it might not seem like, if what I'm saying doesn't sound sexy to you or appealing, it's probably because you don't need to become a staff product designer, or maybe you have other ways of looking at what a staff product designer is, because it can be very different, but that's what I'm trying to learn more about.
I love it. Thank you so much, Pedro, for all these insights. I'm sure that the folks are going to watch this recording. They're going to
Thank
learn
you,
a couple
Hannah.
of lessons. And yeah, I hope they feel empowered, and that we hope we have clarified a couple of questions around what does Pedro do? What is a staff designer? What is a staff person at the UX department? So I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me.
No, thank you so much for the invite. And again, I think this is a great example of exemplifying staff responsibilities. So thank you for kicking off this project. And I hope it's also helpful for people that are watching.
Awesome.